If you want to make a go at screenwriting, you have to learn how to become a proficient writer. And the fastest way to improve in your efficiency is to plan your screenplay. So I'm going to quickly give you 3 different ways to do just that. So 3 ways. One you've heard of, but then I'm going to give you a more robust way to use it with a little bit of a twist. Then one of my favorites, which you may have not heard of, and then one I always use. The one you've heard of, and I'm including a few hacks along the way, is note cards. Note cards get a lot of talk, but few people use them in effective ways. And here's the big benefit of note cards. It allows you to track individual pieces and do so as granularly or as globally as you want. So if you just want to track the story, you can do that. Each story beat or moment can be a card, and if you do that, you'll end up with roughly 30 to 40 cards for only the story moments. But you can also track your main and supporting characters. Give each of them a different color of card and character beats that they need. So if you have 4 supporting characters plus your main character, you're going to end up with 20 to 30 cards just for characters. And to clarify, a beat is something that must happen either for the character or the story so the audience knows what is going on. So for a character, if they're moving from someone who is selfish to someone who is selfless, or maybe a little less selfish, you need 5 cards right off the bat. Them being selfish at the beginning, them unintentionally doing something selfless and realizing it's good, them intentionally trying to be selfless, them being tested and failing, and then them doing something selfless. And as far as the order goes, the first and the last are where they should be, but maybe the others aren't in that order, and you can add new things to it as well, so you can mix them all up as needed. And then you can put them next to the story cards at key moments because you think that's the right place where the character would do that thing. And those are kind of middle of the road examples, but maybe for planning for you, you decide to go more general. You might just have the 15 or so major story beats you have to have in order to have a story, and then maybe 5 or 6 character cards for the critical things, and you end up with 20, 25 cards. Maybe you decide to add in all the scenes as individual cards. And since most movies have 70 to 100 scenes, depending on the type of movie, now you've got 70 to 100 cards, and each are individual scenes. But then you can start slotting the story cards next to or under the scenes along with the character cards, and you could end up with 100 scene cards, 40 story cards, 30 character cards, and this is just an average amount of cards. You could have a lot more. You could also make do with less. And this is why you hear about some writers using colored cards or colored pens. Different types of cards get different colors. Different characters get different colors or pens, right? So however the writer wants to do it is perfectly fine. There's no right or wrong way. But if you use note cards, you can probably tell you can end up with a massive amount of cards. So one issue you're going to have to sort out is space. Where you put them. And you'll have to group them into smaller groups if you have a bunch because of space limitations. So you're only going to work on this section at once, and then you file them all away, and then work on the next section, file them all away, because you can't keep your cards on the dining room table forever. And here's the twist. Once you get your cards in the order you think you want, carve out some time and talk through your whole story, but enable the voice-to-text option on your computer when you do. That way, if you have any tangents or bits of dialogue or moments or whatever that you talk about, it just records. You can also record video and pull the transcript if you know how to do that or have that capability. If you can learn how to use the voice commands to speak your cards into your screenwriting software, you're essentially putting your cards into a loose script format that will save you a lot of time. Now, of course, most screenwriting software has a note card function, but not all planning tools and software are created equal, so use at your discretion. And honestly, one of the benefits of note cards is you can see more of them at once, which you can't always do on the software. You can get an overview of your story, and you can drill down if you want to. Personally, I like being able to see the whole story, and so the next way to plan is one of my favorites, and it works great for action, horror, thriller stories where the audience is expecting things to happen at fairly regular intervals, and it's the clock. I first heard about this through a friend telling me that J.J. Abrams uses it, and since I love J.J.'s stuff, I tried it out, and this works for TV and for film. So let me first use it with a TV example as it's simpler to explain, and then I'll show you the film version. And what you have to know going in is the clock is not only helpful for planning your story, it's also helpful for planning your storytelling, which most planning tools don't really help with. So, the clock. What you do is you draw a circle, and the circle represents the minutes of the show. So it's exactly a clock, 60 minutes. And if you're writing an hour-long drama, it's perfect. So the first thing you do if you're writing a network show or imagining one is mark off the approximate sections for the commercial breaks. And most network shows have 5 to 6 commercial breaks. Some have 7, a few still have 4, not very many. And this doesn't really count the commercials between shows. Okay, each break is about 2 to 3 minutes, give or take. Some are a little longer, some less. Then what you do is you plan out your scenes and beats. But when you do, you mark off how long you think each one of them is. A chase scene is 5 minutes, mark off 5 minutes. Cops investigating a crime scene, that's going to be about 2 minutes, mark off 2 minutes. And you shade things on the circle differently to give you a visual of what's going on. This helps you know if you've got too long of a gap between action or high tension elements. You have to adjust your story structure. Can you get to that car chase sooner, for example? If so, find a way to close that gap. And the reason this is helpful is it lets you see the big picture of your story in one place, and it helps you know you've got your pacing set. And this can be incredibly helpful, especially if you're writing TV, because you can better plan and account for other elements. So if you know that most people who try a streaming show, if that's what you want to write, if you know that they're still watching at the 10-minute mark, they tend to watch the whole episode. And if they're watching at the 20-minute mark, give or take, there's a higher chance they're going to watch additional episodes. Then you want to make sure you're covering those gaps, kind of treating them like commercial breaks where you offer cliffhangers and then some satisfaction to those cliffhangers. And to convert this for film purposes, you can do 2 things. You can either draw 2 circles, the first hour and the second hour, so the midpoint is just the transition from one to the next, or what I do is I just still use 1 circle, but 60 minutes is halfway around, and the whole way around is 120, so I just make it a 2-hour circle instead of a 1-hour circle. Again, this clock method is great for action or horror thriller because audiences are expecting action or scares or big twists at regular intervals. So here, you can map them out and make sure you're giving the audience an excellent ride. So for me, I use this planning method for every type of action adventure or action comedy I write, just to make sure that my pacing and my story is solid. The last way you can plan your story is by using what's called a beat board, which is the one thing I always do when planning a story. I like seeing things all in one place, but instead of a clock face and lots of tiny writing, I break my story into sequences. And I'll link a video at the end of this one where I talk about sequences, or you can just grab my book on story structure where I talk about them in depth. Essentially, I just create a list of scenes, beats, and moments, character and story, and I'm putting them in the order that I want them to be in. Now, when most people create a story, they don't see all of the beats, but they do see groupings of beats. So listen in your head when you're imagining them. You know, in this car chase, there's going to be these 4 things are going to happen. And I'll put a car chase and whatever the 4 things are, 9 or 37, whatever it is, as a group. And then I move things around, sort of like note cards, until I get things like I want. Now, I used to do this on large note cards. So I would have lots of large note cards, and I would have like lots of stuff on that note card because all those things were happening within that kind of section. But a couple of years ago, I discovered Arc Studio Pro has a planning feature very similar to how I like to plan. And since then, I've gone digital. So when I'm planning a story, I just use the planning board in Arc Studio. I can organize it like I want. I can move things around, color code to help me visually see what is going on. It's great. And I actually do this in conjunction with the clock, going back and forth, refining my story and the storytelling until I get it exactly like I want. If you want to check out Arc Studio, there's a link below that gets you a discount off your first year. It's a yearly subscription, it is, but for me, it's worth it because it takes the beat board and converts it to a script, and because I'm pretty detailed on my beat board, when I convert to a script, it translates into roughly 30 pages of script, so I'm never really staring at a blank page wondering what to write, if that is a problem for you. So if that interests you, be sure to check out Arc Studio Pro. There is a free trial if you want to test it out. And if you want to learn more about sequences and how they can help you plan your story, be sure to grab my book, which is linked below, or to get a primer and a 10,000-foot view, watch this. Thank you for watching. Fun buttons and links below. If you found value, hit a button, make a comment about your own planning method or your favorite one I mentioned, and when you tell a story, tell a story that matters. See you later.